Um, hey, Gabe, so excited to be doing this podcast session with you. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, this is for me, this is going to be a pretty exciting podcast. I was just thinking of, the memories that we had together.
Mhm.
And the thing that struck me immediately was I think we first met each other in 2019 at Dreamforce.
Dreamforce. Yeah.
Right? And we had our booths set up opposite each other, Slintel and
Mhm.
Saleswhale. You're running Saleswhale, I was running Slintel. And first time we saw each other, we exchanged some swag, we stayed in touch. And the next time we saw each other was 2 years later, after the same company that acquired us, Six
Yeah.
Sense, acquired you guys, like
Yeah.
a few months later, right? And that was like such a coincidence. And then we had our post acquisition journeys together. And post that, I think after you left Six Sense, you started another company, and I started my second company almost at the same time. So we still have like our second company journeys going on right now. So yeah, I mean, being like parallel paths, I think overall, right, for both of us.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
it's been pretty interesting, and yeah, it was super fun as well. Like having that compatriot, like fellow startup founder who was acquired, going through that journey in the acquired company together. That was pretty fun as well.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it was good to know that I was not alone in that journey.
Yeah.
I had someone to share and talk to during
Yeah.
that phase. So, and we had like two other founders also go
Hmm.
through that journey. So it's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. So Gabe, I have some questions for you. I want to pick your brains for the audience on different topics. I'll start with your entrepreneurial journey first, right? And I was going through your LinkedIn profile too, and it seems like you started off as a coder, right, in the beginning of your career, did coding, and then founded two companies. One company got acquired, the second company is being run. So just wanted to pick your brains in terms of what experiences did you have early on that shaped you into becoming an entrepreneur?
Interesting. Um, I think the biggest experience or the biggest lesson, for me was like basically is that you can just do things, right? And you can just put stuff into the world that people would find useful, right? And if you can just do that, then like there is possibly a way to kind of make a living out of it, right? So I remember one of my earliest experiences where I think I probably was like 19 or 20 years old back then when I was teaching myself how to code. And, I went to the library and, I was just borrowing a bunch of books about iPhone programming because the iPhone just came out and I wanted to build apps for it, right? So, basically borrowed, a few books on Objective-C, started coding, shipped the app to the App Store, right? And it's this like shitty little app that basically listens to music. And then based on the sound waves, it will actually just pulse the flashlight on the front of the screen and change psychedelic colors on the on the actual LED screen, right? And I think within a couple of weeks it was like 75,000 downloads, and that was insane, right? And I think a core memory was basically just taking the train home one evening and seeing someone actually playing with the app on the train. And that was a surreal feeling. Like I probably looked a bit creepy back then. I was like, looking at the guy and they're like, should I tell him that I'm the person that actually built this app? But yeah, so that was a core memory, and that really got me, into this whole journey of like, wanting to build things, wanting to put things in the real world, wanting to watch people use them.
Very cool, very cool.
Yeah.
75,000 in, like, did you say 2 weeks?
A
That's
few
pretty
weeks,
insane.
yeah.
2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And then I think your first company was Saleswhale, correct?
That was my second company. So I
Oh, the
started like
second.
a consulting company, right? Basically, we're doing
Mhm.
like iPhone enterprise apps, for companies, but that's really more of a services based consulting business. And then Salesville was the first real product company
Mhm.
that we started back in 2016.
Oh, cool. Okay. And Salesforce, if I remember, Saleswhale, it was a YC company, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You went to
Yep.
YC,
Yep.
and at that time you were making a lot of noise. You're growing the company pretty well, and then you had a successful exit. So can you walk us
Mhm.
through some of the learnings there? Like, what does YC teach you, and what were some of the challenges that you had faced, and how did you end up with that with the successful outcome that you?
Interesting. That's a very broad question. Like so many lessons. I think the biggest lesson that YC teach really is really just about I guess number one, just constantly iterating, right? Like speed of iteration is king. And the second is just not giving up, right? Like just hang in there and just like be determined. Don't quit. And if you don't quit, basically that's kind of like half the battle won, right? I know that sounds like such a tautology, but like essentially when you trace the journey of a lot of my YC batchmates, right? Even those companies that didn't seem that successful or like uh promising during the batch, right? But almost every single one of those companies who kind of like held in there, they almost always had some sort of a good outcome, or they're doing well today, right? So I think that's probably an interesting meta lesson. In terms of the journey to exit, um I think probably the most interesting learning would be around hiring, right? Like just how to hire well as a startup. So we made so many mistakes, but I think in retrospect, the biggest learning for me is actually to really take a risk on unproven talent, right? Like people who, for whatever reason, they just don't fit central casting, right? If you can find a way to find really talented people who are either really early in their career, or like in the words of, one of my, employees, like kind of like, misshapen gems that you can kind of bring in and fit them into your organization and get them to be productive. I think that is a unfair advantage. And I guess the last one is just don't take too much advice, right? Like every successful company is idiosyncratic and singular. So, just yeah, just be careful of taking too much advice.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think grit stands out a lot. Even
Mm-hmm.
in my experience, a lot of I used to work in a co-working space, and a lot of
Mm.
companies in the co-working space, the founders came in. 6 months later, they were job searching, right? And 1 year
Oh
later,
my
they were
God.
job searching.
Okay.
The people who stuck for like 2+ years and kept building, kept their heads
Yep.
down, they went through all kinds of low moments, but they still came out doing something successful. So that was good learning for me too.
Absolutely. Right. And another thing about co-working space as well, I don't know if you realize, but like, so we started off from a co-working space as well. After 6 p.m., the whole place is empty. And you're like, what the hell are these people doing? Yeah.
Cool. And then, from Saleswhale, and Saleswhale got acquired by Six Sense. You were there for a few years, and and more recently, you started another company, the name of which was pretty intriguing to me. It's called Blue Whale, right? And but it's in a completely different space. Saleswhale, I believe, was in the sales tech space, AI tool in sales tech, marketing tech. And Blue Whale, from what I understand, you're in the solar energy storage space.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Could you tell us a little bit about what Blue Whale does, and why the transition, like from software, from being a coder to Sales Whale to a non-software energy storage company?
Yeah, so I can kind of start off with what Blue Whale Energy does, and then I can kind of share the backstory about how I got into this space, what motivated me, to get into this space. So basically, Blue Whale Energy, what we do is that we are what I call a novel energy storage company. So, what we actually build are small modular 2 kilowatt hour, sodium ion battery storage devices. And each device is around the size of a briefcase, around 20 kg, right? So the idea is that you put them on rooftops. Underneath solar panels, you directly connect your solar panels to each of these modular battery packs. And then these modular battery packs just reuse the existing infrastructure on the rooftop, to basically make your solar panel what they call dispatchable, which means you can store the energy and release it, at a subsequent time of your choosing, right? So this is what we do, right? Um, it's very hardware heavy. This is the first time in my life that I'm dealing with hardware and objects in the physical world. Started my entire career in software, so yeah, it's definitely a pretty kind of like insane kind of switch, for me. So I think why do such a thing, right? Sometimes I ask myself that as well. I think the core motivation really is, wanting to help to solve climate change, right? And the way that you solve climate change, I mean, like it or not, is by dealing with the physical world, right? You have to deploy steel in the ground, right? You have to deploy physical infrastructure, right? There's only so much you can do in software. Not to say that you can't, but a lot of impact comes from deploying stuff in the physical world, right? I guess the more interesting question is that, okay, then why solve climate change, right? And I think this brings me to an interesting kind of another core memory, which is I remember back in 2019, when I was running Saleswhale, we just raised our Series A, things were looking good. And I had one employee who actually, was leaving the business. And, when I did an exit interview with him, it was really interesting. Like, he actually said something like, Gabe, actually, what are we really doing, right? Like, all Salesforce does is to help Fortune 2000 companies convert a few more qualified leads and help them become 3.4% more profitable. I don't really see the meaning in what I'm doing every day. And I'm like, I don't really agree, but okay, thanks for this. Ouch, right? And that became something that, like, it's just kind of a recurring thing that, I just think about from time to time over the last few years, right? And yeah, so the long story short is that I guess for my second company, after selling Salesville, I want to do something more impactful, right? Like, I just became a father, have a 4-year-old daughter and a 4-month-old daughter. Wanted to build a better world for them. And I think climate change is really more of those existential problems that you know our generation and their generation faces. I think Obama said something along the lines of, like, climate change is, we are the first generation to feel the effects of climate change and probably the last generation who can do something about it, right? So that's really something that, I wanted to help solve. And yeah, that's kind of how I fell into this path.
Very cool. So the mission really excites you, and it's a very, very noble mission for you to pursue. And I'm sure you put your founder hat and said, "Where can I spend the next 10 years of my life?" And
Absolutely.
this was your calling, right? Like,
Yeah.
so, yeah, pretty cool. Although it's a completely different space, you have to learn everything from scratch. Like, there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of founders who start their second company, they piggyback off the first one, right? Either do it in a similar space or similar, if they do a tech company, they do a tech company again. But in your case, did you like the challenge of throwing all of that away and then learning everything from scratch in a domain that you probably do not know that well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to be very honest, I'm not too sure if I would have the confidence to do this if not for the whole explosion in large language models, which I know sounds very crazy, right? Like what are you talking about, right? You're running a hardware company and then you're saying like large language models. And the backstory is that, I think around 1 year to 1.5 years before I started Blue Whale Energy, I was actually immersing myself in the space, right? Just learning electrical engineering, power engineering from scratch, basically learning how to build small hardware side projects, build my first battery pack, battery management system, maximum point, power tracking controller, build my first PCB board. And interestingly enough, a lot of that was basically through the indiscriminate use of large language models, where it's almost kind of like having a PhD advisor that you can just ask questions, drill down first principles, show them schematics and diagrams, and ask, hey, how will you do this better? And that has been a very, very big help.
Oh, very cool, very cool. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, companies are generally born like many months or a year before they're actually launched, right? So it's
Yeah.
very cool to hear the backstory behind that. Um, so moving on a little bit, just want to talk about building AI products since you talked about AI for a bit. And I know Saleswhale was an out and out AI company. I think you were
Mhm.
doing GPT way before GPT was cool. Um, so a question I have, like when you build companies or build AI products, uh, what what is your core guiding philosophy to build products that users truly love?
Uh, I have so many spicy thoughts. Do we really want to open this can of worms now?
It's
um,
fine, yeah. I know some of those.
oh,
Would love
shit.
for the audience to hear as well.
Yeah, so I guess the number one core philosophy, which uh, is probably controversial, is it's probably better to risk bonus than triviality. Like it's better to try to be bold than to be trivial, right? And if not at least 50% of people are telling you that you're crazy when you're showing them what you want to do, and they are not telling you that hey, I would never use this, I would never trust a AI to do this, then you're probably playing it too safe. That is probably the number one core philosophy, right? And there are a lot of reasons for that, right? Like, can you imagine how crazy a product like Saleswhale sounded back in 2016? Right. So for context, Saleswhale is an AI assistant that basically reaches out to your leads via email, and when they reply, we have this back and forth conversation with them, and we try to qualify these leads for you, and if they are qualified, we hand them over to a human sales rep. It probably sounds very normal now in 2024, right? Because then again, there are like 10,000 other companies doing the same thing, but basically this is something that people were literally afraid of, right? Back in 2016, like hey, if you guys screw up and you screw up these leads, I get fired, right? Like, are you for real? Like, are you guys crazy, right? But that has worked out well for us, right? So yeah, I think that in general, if you are just copying what competitors are doing, and if you're just trying to do something that seems safe, then why bother getting out of bed in the morning at all, right? Like,
Yeah.
you got to be excited, right? And your team has to be excited in order to try to build a great product that your users love. And if you're excited, I think that's the number one prerequisite, right? That if you want your users to be excited about your product as well. So that's kind of, I don't know, like my core
Yeah.
philosophy when it comes to building AI products.
No, so yeah, and you also need the vision, right? You have to do it early enough before people are paying attention, but you can't be too early that there's no
Mhm.
market for it, right? You have to be like right at that time, maybe like right when it starts like becoming important.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. In
so on that
retrospect,
note,
Salesforce was probably too early, but anyways.
it worked out fine, so I
Yeah.
don't know about that. Uh, like you said, a lot of companies are trying to do that in 2024, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, back in 2019, 2020, 21, when you were already cranking revenue, this you're probably one of the maybe 4 or 5 companies in the world that was doing it at that time.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, question for you on that. So when you were building Saleswhale, right, you had your own roadmap. Like I'm sure you had your AI roadmap. You wanted to do a lot with AI, maybe multimodal stuff, a lot of different stuff, right? And then you have when you go to market, and you said you're a little early. When you go to market, you have customers asking for different things. Right? Like
Mm.
you have them asking for a lot of non AI related stuff too, because that
Yeah.
AI hasn't fully caught up on on their side.
Mhm.
So how do you balance that? And even today, like that is true even today, when people are building AI products and going to market, a lot of times customers may not be asking for that AI stuff. So how does one balance those two?
Mm. So I think what you're asking is really how do you balance, your core innovation slash AI roadmap versus customer ask, right? Customer requests, which are theoretically infinite, right? Like if you log into, I think if you go into 6sense feature request board now, there are probably like hundreds, thousands of feature requests, right?
Yeah, and
Um,
just to add some more
yeah.
context to that question, Gabe, like
Mhm.
there's a lot of companies, right? Even big companies where, like you said, there's so many customer requests. If you filter down and see what are most customers asking for, that's what product management does, right? What do most customers ask for and build that stuff? It still may not be the right stuff, because there might be
Yeah.
another company that's coming, building everything ground up with AI that displaces a large company that is not doing it, right? So,
Mm.
so in this era, especially, it's very important to figure out like what's the right balance, and how do you apply AI innovation versus customer apps, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot boils down to what you said earlier, which is having a very clear vision and very clear thinking about, where you want to head to, right? So I think before I go too much into that, I think just in general, there's a lot of mid-weight thinking today in product management, right? Where there are a lot of frameworks being thrown around, like RISE, ICE, what LNO, I don't know, right? Like, I think a lot of it is just common sense, right? Like, a common failure modality is basically, you are overly reactive to all the customer, requests, and then you whiplash your team, right? And then your whole roadmap turns into a Frankenstein, right? So I think something that's worked for me, or something that I think we have gotten to kind of work over the years is spend the time upfront building a model, right? This is the model of, where do you think the world is going? Where do you want your product to go? This is where, we think we're going to innovate in and to win. And then you use this customer feedback to update the model. And then you use this model to update your roadmap. Never ever inject customer feedback directly straight into the roadmap, like what I see some teams do. I think that just creates a lot of chaos and turns your product into a Frankenstein, like I mentioned. So something that we like to say back in Salesville and even conversational email, which I don't know in retrospect if that's right or not, like we kind of make a pun on the whole let them eat cake kind of like meme, like let them scream. One thing we notice is that especially if you are moving fast enough, you're innovating fast enough, you see a lot of customers who are very vocal. They are screaming, right? Oh, if you guys don't have this HubSpot integration, if you don't have calendaring, you don't have all these non-AI features, we're going to churn. Like, okay, like let's see if you churn. And these people just renew year after year after year, right? And so I think like for us, we did make some pretty interesting trade-offs, when I was running Saleswhale and conversational email, especially in a space that's so fast moving like AI, is we tend to over-index on building new, exciting stuff, for better or worse, right? So let's say, for example, when customers ask us for HubSpot integration, they've been asking for 2 years, right? We decided to build the AI Rider instead, right? And in retrospect, if you ask any of them, would you rather have HubSpot integration or AI Rider, right? And most of them say, yeah, I would love to have the AI Rider, right? People ask us for, hey, is there a way that I can do native calendaring? Instead of having to use Chili Piper or Calendly, can you guys build that? I said, yeah, no. We rather use the resources to build like AI responses, and that turned out to be a huge hit as well. So I think sometimes at the end of the day, especially when it comes to really fast moving frontiers like AI, I think it's really just delivering that value that other companies, find hard to deliver. That kind of, how do I phrase it? Like, appeases the customers somewhat, while at the same time kind of like, not going into this modality where you're just shipping send. And that leaves you very vulnerable to disruption and, put you at risk of kind of like falling behind. So I guess the TLDR is that, for better or worse, and this is again another one of those spicy philosophies, is that I think especially when it comes to building AI products, it is okay to do a whole bunch of things in a really shitty way if you just get those 1 or 2 things that are really core to your business right. Yeah.
No, very well said. I think it all starts with like a very strong vision and conviction on why you're doing it, and then take feedback with a pinch of salt, right? Customer feedback, and see where it falls in, where it doesn't. Like that, and don't make a hodgepodge. Right? Don't make a hodgepodge of a product which confuses everybody out there. Cool. All right.
Caveat is that if you're a product manager and you're listening to this and you get fired, I take no responsibility.
Yeah, we're just founders giving advice.
Sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no, I was just moving to the next question
Yeah.
in terms of. I also want to see like from your perspective, because when people are building products, like in B2B companies, for example, there's a lot of product being thrown at users, right? Every month, companies are releasing features, every quarter, every year. And you and I know, like most of those never get adopted by a customer. Like people have 1 or 2 primary use cases and they just use the product. Right? So do you see when AI is, helping out in a lot of different ways, can AI really help improve product adoption too? Can it help discoverability of features, help users navigate, understand products better, or get their actions done better? Like any views on that?
I believe so. Yeah, I'm actually quite bullish about this, and I think there are a lot of different ways where people just have to experiment and see what works. I can share something that kind of like we were kicking around but never really got around to doing it before I left, which is so every time when conversational email pushes out a new feature, right? We'll kind of like Sam Liu it, and that sounds a bit weird. Like, what is Sam Liu it? So Sam Liu is actually a real person. So Sam Liu is a adoption consultant, right? That worked with us at Saleswhale. So every time we had a new feature, what we get him to do is to literally use the feature on behalf of the customer, right? So when we ship the new feature called Content Offer Play, instead of kind of like sending a newsletter and say, hey, we have this new feature, go try it out, here's a video, go watch the video, like who the hell is going to do that, right? Like, so what Sam does is that he chooses 5 to 10 accounts that he wants to get them to use the product, He'll go into their account, he will set everything up for them, via the new feature, send them an email, say, hey, I've set all this up for you. All you have to go in there is just to log in, press this button, and literally, it will work, right? Or if you have any feedback, just let me know. I will change them for you. And then only after I deliver the value, if you find this interesting, then come back to me. I can kind of teach you how to do this and how to set this up yourself. And we did this for every new feature that we shipped. And it was almost like a playbook. It worked really, really well. So I'm also thinking, like, number one, how many Sam Lius are there, in all the various companies? And how much of this can actually be replaced by AI, right? Because at the end of the day, when you talk about adoption, right? Adoption is an investment, right? Like a new user has to take time out of their busy schedule. Like they are, like doing all of this crap, trying to hit their targets and KPIs, and then you're asking them to learn a new thing. Come on, give me a break, right? Like people are just reluctant to invest time to learn new things if the payoff is unclear. So how do you kind of like, make it as frictionless as possible and make the payoff as deterministic as possible for them to even try and see the results first, right? AI can help with 90% of that. And then once they do that, then basically kind of like come backwards that, okay, now I'm motivated to actually learn about this feature. That's kind of how we think about it.
Yeah, I remember in sales tech, the space we were in, like an average seller was used between 6 to 8 tools, right? And each tool releasing tons of features every month. There's so much product being thrown at them, and they have to go and do their daily job. So it's not easy. So anything to boost adoption there. Really.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Sorry, go for it.
I was just saying, like, I think I also believe, AI can help solve the discovery use case, like discovery of product features, and then even recommendation and actions can be automated using AI.
Absolutely.
Yes,
And a corollary to that, right, which is the whole AI agents thing, like probably a stupid and a really far-flung idea, but like, what if you could embed external AI agents into, legacy apps like Salesforce or stuff like that, and they can just go in there and do stuff for you?
Yeah.
Right. And kind of, yeah, right. So like the best kind of adoption is no adoption, right? So what if I can just be very declarative with my intent? This is what I want to do. And then I have a bunch of agents that go into various softwares, across softwares, maybe even, and just get this stuff done for me. Right.
Autonomous, semi-autonomous agents that just alert you when the job is done, and they're actually doing the stuff for you as a human, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Awesome. So moving on, Gabe, like, want to pick your brains on, what you think about the future of AI, right? So where do you think, like, any thoughts on where AI will take us 5 to 10 years from now? And especially, let me just add like another dimension to it. I think most people like think about technology, like technology companies and where AI goes. Now that you're doing a non-tech company, like an energy storage company, can you see AI impacting industries outside tech, like energy, sustainability, and how do you think AI is going to impact?
100%. Like I said earlier, like this whole company wouldn't even be possible, without large language models. I was just talking about this over lunch, with a colleague. I think the real value of AI for kind of non-tech industries would be actually a force multiplier, right? So just imagine being able to second a PhD advisor for every employee, right? Hardware employee, software employee, firmware employee, all of them have like a PhD advisor in their pockets. That's really crazy, right? So right now, we have a team of 3.5 people. And the reason that we are able to move so quickly is because, in the words of my colleague, he said that like sometimes, it kind of feels a bit unfair, like, that I am doing things that I shouldn't be able to do otherwise, but I'm able to do so because of these large language models that I'm kind of like abusing / exploiting, right? So I think if you really zoom out, in my world at least, or in this current world that I inhabit, I think LLMs just make engineering more accessible, right? Because there's just a shortage of hardware engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, and there are just not enough engineers, and they're like infinite demand for problems to be engineered and to solve, right? In the built environment, in the real world, right? And having engineering be more accessible, I think that's going to be a huge force multiplier and game changer.
Interesting. Yeah, moving to the last section, Gabe, just want to pick your brains and see like if you have any advice for aspiring entrepreneurs. So founders who are applying to Y Combinator and trying to navigate the approval process, right? What advice do you have for them?
Just apply. Yeah, just
Just,
apply.
just yeah, just apply this, but there's no blueprint of for success here, right?
No, I mean, like, a lot
Basically,
of people kind of just psych themselves out, like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to get it. I mean, like, honestly, it's just like 10 minutes, right? Just apply, right? For us as well, we didn't expect to get into YC as well when we applied. I literally threw the application together in like 15 minutes, right? And shot a really crappy 1 minute video without really expecting much. And, we somehow managed to get an interview, right? So I think number one is just apply. Don't psych yourself out. You're not too early. And I think a more meta advice on the application process is, and even the interview process is, try not to sell. Like, don't try to sell the YC interviewers on why, your startup is the best thing since sliced bread, but just try to be clear, right? Just speak really clearly, really concisely on what are you doing, the problem you're solving, and don't try to kind of like, be overly salesy. That's the kind of the meta advice that I have.
cool. In your journey as an entrepreneur, were there any moments of failure or like any pivots that you did that led to unexpected success?
Probably how we even got into the whole LLM space in the first place, I guess. Yeah. So the really abridged version is that, we prior to COVID, we were mostly selling to offline industries, so like education, events, automotive, and we were doing pretty well. COVID came, decimated our business. We have to do like a bunch of layoffs. That was really painful. And then, one day, I basically read on the news that like, hey, there's this like private beta program for GPT-3, that seems to be pretty interesting, right? So I actually wrote in to Sam Altman, who actually was one of the group partners at YC, who interviewed us, during our YC application. Like, hey, saw this private beta for GPT-3 thing. Can I get access to it? And then basically, he forwarded the email to his CTO, who then gave me access. I started playing with it, and holy shit, this is a game changer. So spent 2 weeks, just holed up in my bedroom, coding the first prototype for, essentially what would eventually become, the AI writer for Saleswhale. I think that we were probably the first, like literally the first ever in the whole world, to have a email AI writer built on GPT-3 back then.
Wow, I didn't know. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So and the truth is that we probably wouldn't have the courage to kind of try that out and to pursue that if our core business hadn't been decimated by COVID, a few months ago, right? So yeah, it's just trying that new thing, and then I guess once we shipped it, the rest was history. So yeah.
And also, I think the second part was just stay curious and ask. Don't be afraid to ask, right? That's what you did.
Yeah,
You just went ahead
don't be
and
afraid to
asked.
ask.
Cool. And so Gabriel, you're in Singapore, right? You have built startups in Singapore. I live in the Valley. I see a lot of startups here, and I've seen startups in India. So what's unique about building startups in Singapore? And you've spent time in the Valley too. So Singapore versus Valley, any advantages that you see in Singapore?
Maybe I can zoom out one level, which is that if you are building a software or a SaaS company, move to the US. Like, that's the advice I give again and again. Like, there's no reason to do it in Singapore. There are just so many advantages of being in the US if you are in AI and you are in software today, right? But where I think Singapore shines and why I made a very deliberate decision to build in Singapore this time is actually we have a very progressive and stable, but at the same time, paradoxically agile regulatory environment, right? Which is why you see a lot of like fintech startups, or like Singapore now is becoming the next nexus for crypto startups. Is because like, we have a progressive regulatory frameworks, and Singapore government is very happy to kind of like give out sandboxes, regulatory sandboxes to all of these crypto companies to try new things. And especially in the space like energy, where it's very, very heavily regulated, Singapore honestly has one of the world's most progressive energy markets. We have a wholesale energy market. The regulators are very progressive when it comes to trying out new things and launching new sandboxes, which makes it, very friendly for, startups like us to try to
Mm.
innovate in the energy space.
Yeah, that's really unique insights. I always knew
Mhm.
Singapore was a hotbed for entrepreneurship. Like government encourages entrepreneurs a lot, but this is for non-tech industries and giving all these incentives is really cool.
Yeah,
Um,
incentives and this sandbox to play in, right? They call it the regulatory sandbox, where, in a bad way, it's like you can break a bunch of laws. Just tell us which laws you plan to break, and then we give you access.
yeah,
Yeah,
especially in new sectors, you're always you don't know what you can do and what you can't. You're trying to explore, push the boundaries there.
absolutely.
Cool. So Gabe, this was great. This was amazing. I do have like a really quick fire
Mhm.
few questions. Hope you don't mind me asking.
Yep.
Um, okay, cool. Let's do it. So question one, what are big trends in AI that you're seeing right now?
Um, have you tried the new O1 Pro? I think that's amazing.
I haven't tried it yet. The
Yeah,
$200 per month, Trishan?
yeah. The new one Pro. Try it, and I'm super excited about stuff like that. So basically, it's about like throwing more compute at a problem, right? And seeing it, seeing if that model can actually solve problems that were previously, hard to solve in one shot. Um, for older models. So basically, I started playing with it like over the weekend, and it was able to one shot problems that previously, we were not able to solve, especially like really interesting, hardcore scientific PhD level problems. I think that's really interesting.
Mhm. So you do think it's much better than the $20 per month plan or the free plan, right?
Oh, for sure.
You
For
think
sure.
it's
Yes.
worth the price difference?
Yeah.
Cool. Um, Applications versus AI agents. Right now, you see so many AI agents everywhere. Like, what is your take on the future?
AI agents, like, tell me, let me tell you what I want, and then you just get it done. I don't need to care about the details. Give me some sort of leeway to kind of steer, you know, um, your inputs, and that's it.
Does that mean applications will have to morph themselves into an agent at some point?
I don't know. I really don't know. Or maybe AI agents can control and manipulate applications.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, good. That's an interesting perspective. Or maybe there'll be some applications that are like systems of record which will exist, and then for the most part, you have AI agents.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, Favorite AI tool, the one that you can't live without.
Notebook LM.
Oh, really? You use that?
Yeah.
The
So basically, the great thing about Notebook LM is that you can throw a whole bunch of documents, like literally like, so what I use it, like the most recent use case was loading in thousands and thousands of pages of energy market rules. And there's so many rules. Like I doubt, like, some of the people who wrote the rules 20 years ago, whether they're still, whether they are retired or something. And then basically just asking it and having a conversation on like really, really factual, non-hallucination conversations. And I think the thing that's really interesting as well is that you can actually get it to generate a podcast of
yeah.
that thousands of pages, right? And you can actually steer the podcast and say that, look, I only want to focus on this specific topic. So can you generate the 10 minutes podcast? And that's actually surprisingly good. And you can just listen to it when you're driving. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that tool.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
was wondering if I should replace my podcast with one generated from yeah. I've heard a lot of that, all about that podcast. Got fire. Cool. Any advice for aspiring AI founders?
Hmm. I think just don't overthink it, right? Just build things that you're genuinely excited about. Be willing to try new tools, right? Like whenever new tools like, O1 Pro or stuff like that comes out, just try it, right? And yeah, just move fast. Don't overthink stuff. Build stuff that you personally are excited about.
Interesting. Last question. What's your favorite productivity hack as a founder?
Sleep, sleep. Really,
How
like
many hours?
when
How many hours?
8 hours. I try 8 hours every day. Like something that I didn't really do when I was running Saleswhale, and I kind of regret it. Like but now I basically it's like sleep is the number one priority. Like nothing else, comes close. And I actually kind of like taken it to an extreme. And I actually try to optimize every facet of my sleep, including like wearing this wearable which tracks my REM sleep, light sleep, deep sleep, and then experimenting with like, okay, when's my last cup of coffee? How late should I eat before dinner? What's my winding down routine? And just experimenting with it to make sure that I can get that sweet 8 hours of sleep every day.
That's such valuable advice. I mean, I try to
Yeah.
get 6.5, 7, but I see it makes such a big difference for me. Like when I get
Yeah.
that extra 1 hour, right? Sometimes
Uh-huh.
the
Yeah.
whole day is
Right.
more productive. Yeah,
Yeah. Like that extra 1 hour, like your entire day is so much more productive. Um. Yeah. So sleep.
yeah, awesome. So, Gabe, this was amazing. Really, really enjoyed the podcast, and it was good catching up with an old friend. And like I said, we both share our journeys together. We're continuing to do that, right? We both are doing our own startups now. But thank you so much for taking time and reconnecting again.
Yeah. This was fun. Thanks for having me. And yeah, really nice to reconnect.
Yeah, same here. All the best for your startup and for the rest of the year.
Thanks, Deepak.